Magandang hapon, Malacanang Press Corps, at welcome sa ating press briefing ngayon hapon, April 28. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s official visit to the United States is scheduled for next week. His itinerary will begin on Monday, May 1st, with a meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden, followed by an expanded meeting with key cabinet officials. The President will also attend the 42nd ASEAN Summit in Indonesia. To give us an update on these, we are joined by the Department of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Maria Teresita Data, Office of the American Affairs Deputy Assistant Gunter Salas, who is not really joining us right now, and Office of ASEAN Affairs Deputy Assistant Secretary Angelito Nayan. Good afternoon to our DFA officials. Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you for this opportunity, Daphne. Allow me just to give you an overview of the two trips that have been assigned us to talk on. So in terms of President Marcos's official visit to the United States, let me refresh you in terms of the press release raised a couple of days ago. President Marcos will travel to Washington, D.C. from 30 April to 4 May 2023 on an official visit aimed at reaffirming the special relationship between the Philippines and the United States. As mentioned, the President's itinerary will begin on May 1 with a meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden, followed by an expanded meeting with key cabinet officials. The visit will reaffirm the bonds of friendship that give definition and significance to the many facets of the bilateral relationship, underpinned by the close affinity shared by the Filipinos and Americans alike for many years. It will substantially progress efforts to further deepen relations and political ties, to bring about lasting socio-economic partnerships, as well as enhance defense and security cooperation. The President is expected to advance Philippine socio-economic development priorities and harness closer partnerships in such areas as agriculture, energy, climate change, digital transformation and technology, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, supply chains, and infrastructure. The U.S. is a major bilateral trade and official development assistance partner and maintains a shared commitment with the Philippines for more dynamic economic relations. Other scheduled activities of the President will include meetings with legislators, major U.S. companies, and business organizations, and he will also deliver a major policy speech in a think tank in Washington, D.C. While in Washington, he's also a community who represent the Philippine-American diaspora in the United States, numbering some 4.4 million. That is for the U.S. trip. Allow me now to proceed with the visit and participation in the 42nd ASEAN Summit in Labuan Bajo, Indonesia, from 10 to 11 May 2023, at the invitation of the President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Joko Widodo, as this year's ASEAN Chair, under the theme ASEAN Matters Epicentrum of Growth. The ASEAN Summit provides a platform for ASEAN leaders to discuss and exchange views on key regional issues and build consensus on matters of mutual interest and provide policy directions on ASEAN community building efforts. The opening ceremony of the 42nd ASEAN Summit will be held in the morning of 10 May. Following the plenary session, a series of interfaces among ASEAN leaders and representatives and/or delegates of relevant ASEAN bodies are scheduled on the same day. The ASEAN leaders will hold interfaces with the following: the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, or the AIPA, the ASEAN Youth Representatives, ASEAN Business Advisory Council, or ASEAN BAC, High-Level Task Force on the ASEAN Community Post-2025 Vision. Following the leaders' decision on the application of Timor-Leste for ASEAN's membership at the 40th and 41st ASEAN Summits in 2022, the ASEAN leaders are expected to adopt a roadmap on Timor-Leste's full membership in ASEAN at the 42nd ASEAN Summit. The Prime Minister of Timor-Leste, Tar Matan Ruak, is expected to attend the 42nd ASEAN Summit as an observer for the first time. The President will also take part in the 15th Jerusalem, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East Asian Growth Area or BIMP-IAGA Summit, which will be convened on the 11th of May 2023. The BIMP-IAGA Summit will be chaired by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim of Malaysia. And here, during this meeting, the President will discuss developments under BIMP-IAGA Vision 2025 towards promoting economic development, strengthening connectivity, and the sustainable management of natural resources in the sub-region. Expected after the meeting are some 16 outcome documents which are being targeted to be issued, adopted, or noted during the meeting. That concludes the overview of these two meetings.
Okay. Asik Nayan, would you like to add something?
Thank you very much, Ma'am Daphne. Good to see you again, members of the press corps whom I had the pleasure of meeting at the UN General Assembly last September. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Spokesperson Ambassador Dasa, for the overview. This is the fourth time Indonesia has assumed responsibility as chair of ASEAN, having been the ASEAN chair in 1976, 2003, and 2011. And this year's theme is ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. The President is expected to assert the importance of demonstrating ASEAN's centrality in the region amidst geopolitical rivalries and advancing the Philippines' priorities in ASEAN through regional and multilateral cooperation in areas such as long-term food and energy security, efforts towards economic recovery, combating transnational crimes, upgrading of technical and vocational education and training, adopting climate and disaster resilient technologies, and transitioning to renewable and alternative energy technologies, and the protection of migrant workers, among others. You would be interested to hear that one of the important outcomes of the summit is a leader's declaration on combating trafficking in persons caused by the use and misuse of technology. The statement is yet to be finalized, but this is something that the Philippines fully supports, owing to our advocacy in ASEAN on the protection of migrant workers and the Philippines' role as lead shepherd for ASEAN cooperation against trafficking in person under the framework of the Senior Officials Meeting on Transnational Crime. That's it from my part. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, thank you. And now we open the floor. We have Maricel Halili of TV5.
Thank you, Ms. Daphne. Hi, good afternoon, Ambassador Sornayan. Ambassador, you mentioned several issues that may be discussed by the President during his meeting in Washington. Aside from these issues, ano pa po yung magiging focus ng discussion ni President Marcos with President Joe Biden? Are they going to discuss issues about EDCA, security, and China?
Discussions on security and defense is a given. It's something that will actually be raised. But I think for this trip, there will be a heavy emphasis in terms of the economic agenda, how the President will actually work to advance his priorities in terms of agriculture and food security, in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of renewable energy and clean energy. So these are some of the sectors that will actually be highlighted during the visit itself. As I mentioned, there will be several activities during the visit of the President. He will have his official meetings across the duration of his trip, but when it comes to the President Biden, it will be on May 1. He will also have an expanded bilateral. He will meet with different companies, and where he will actually be able to promote the Philippines, both as a trading partner as well as investment market. So there will be a lot of opportunities during the time that the President is in Washington, D.C., and I think he will cover various aspects of the relations. It's not just defense and security, it will also be economic promotion of economic interests and the like. I think what will be underscored also is that while defense and security is actually very important, economic security is also equally important, because if you have economic security, that will also promote political security, and vice versa. So this nexus, I think, is what will also be underscored during the visit.
Ma'am, do we expect some agreements to be sealed or signed during the
Right now, Maricel, what I do know is there will be a joint statement that will be released, and between the two leaders' joint statement. The U.S. will also come up with a fact sheet on the bilateral relations. There may be one or two other documents, but right now I am not at liberty to talk about these.
Okay, thank you, Maricel. We have Nestor Corrales.
Good morning, Ambassador Daza. As a military ally of the United States, what commitment will President Marcos ask U.S. President Joe Biden in the face of China's persistent encroachment in Philippine waters and harassment of Philippine troops? Because just this Sunday, a Chinese Coast Guard ship blocked a Philippine patrol vessel, causing a frightening near collision of Philippine Coast Guard's BRP Malapascua with the Chinese ship near Ayungin in Shoal. So what particular commitment will the President ask his counterpart during their meeting?
First, I'd like to say we take note of the PCG incident report that was actually also raised in the media. I do want to backtrack a bit and say, in terms of DFA's perspective, every time there's an incident report, we await the official incident report coming from all relevant agencies. PCG is one of which. And the DFA actually analyzes and studies and analyzes and makes an assessment of it. And based on that, based on this incident report, the inappropriate diplomatic action is taken. So this has been ongoing quietly. Some actually have been raised in the press, but in terms of diplomatic action being undertaken by the department, this is continuing. Now, in terms of the President's visit, and in terms of the South China Sea issue, I think the President, and this is just, I cannot preempt the President, but I think the President will underscore what we want the waters to be. And we want the waters, the sea, particularly South China Sea and West Philippine Sea, to be a sea of peace, security, and stability and prosperity. Because if it's a sea of peace, security, and stability, then the country can grow, then the region can grow and prosper. So I will be safe to assume that he will also count on the U.S. to actually support Philippine efforts in terms of enhancing maritime cooperation, upholding international law and freedom of navigation and overflight, and promoting sustainable development of marine resources. We also, I think, he will also, I think, underscore that from the perspective of the Philippines and members of the region, we are looking at great powers, including the United States, to calm the waters, because as I earlier said, we want the waters to be a sea of peace. We are also very wary of possible miscalculation or further escalation of tensions in the region. And in terms of the South China Sea, the Philippines, the President has always been consistent in saying that we will uphold our sovereignty and safeguard our sovereign rights and interests in the South China Sea. And we will do this through diplomacy, military, law enforcement, and public diplomacy action.
Thank you. Christina Maralit.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, in relation to the previous question, the President recently said in an interview that he wants the Mutual Defense Treaty to evolve. Has he given any specifics regarding this, kung ano po yung mga tweaks na gusto niyang mangyari with the Mutual Defense Treaty? And nasabi po niya which direction he wants the Philippine government to take, and will this be anchored on the current situation in the South China Sea?
You're right, Christina. The President has come up with a statement that there's need for partnerships not only with the United States to evolve, and it's important because the conditions are changing. There are a lot of challenges that are emerging, and to be relevant, any partnership has to evolve. But in terms of the specific as to directions, I have not privy to specific instructions as how this will evolve. But I do also know that if it is a matter of evolving our defense security relations, it's not just the DFA that will be involved, it will be other agencies as well that will be involved in it, and including, of course, the DND, the National Security Council, and the like.
Okay, back to Nestor Corrales.
Ambassador Dasa, has the Department of Foreign Affairs or the government activated a direct line communication with China to raise the recent near collision incident in the South China Sea?
China used it after the laser incident. If you recall, China communicated. There was they called and they raised their position, and we also gave our position regarding the military-grade laser incident in the waters. So that was one. But I also know that after the meeting, there have been an interest to actually activate different communication mechanisms. It's something that is actually being explored.
Okay. Eden Santos, Net 25.
Good afternoon po, ma'am. Aside from yung mga issue ng military, defense, security, isa po sa mas inaabangan ng ating mga kababayan ay kung ano po yung maaasahan ng mga Pilipino sa mga trips na ito ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Like sa investment, are we expecting po ng mas maraming malalagdaang deals sa US and even sa Indonesia? Alam naman natin na laging nakatutok ang pansin ng ating mga kababayan, especially mga kritiko ng administrasyon, dito sa mga biyahe pong ito, foreign trips ng ating Pangulo.
Yes, Eden, that's a fair question. I think it's important that we also know exactly what happens after, but it's premature for me to actually say exactly what would come out of the visit. I do know that the President will be joined by the economic team, and there will be different activities, as I mentioned earlier. And through this, I'm sure that there may be some arrangements that would actually evolve. So it's something that I will ask you to wait a bit, and I'm sure PCO would come out with releases relative to what has been accomplished during the meetings, the numerous meetings that will be held while the President is in Washington.
Okay. Raquel Bayan.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, good afternoon po. Will the President meet with the Filipino community in US po?
It's safe to assume he will. It is a very big community. The community has actually contributed greatly to the United States economy and alike. So it is safe to assume that he will be meeting with the community, which he has been doing actually in all his trips. It's like a template in terms of the trip, the meeting with the community which the President enjoys actually is one of the things that's actually always included in the trip schedule allowing.
Do we have data po how many Filipinos are there in US po? Or
There-
DC alone, ma'am?
For DC, allow me to check if I can have it, but it's 4 million that we have in terms of statistics. Okay, let me get this right. As of June 2020, the US is the top destination in terms of overseas Filipinos. The number of Filipinos living in the US is estimated at 4.21 million, making Filipinos the third largest Asian group in the country. A number of Americans of Filipino descent also hold public office in the US. And among the top states with the largest concentration of Filipinos or Filipino Americans are California, which has about 1.6 million, Hawaii, which has roughly 372,000, Texas, which has about 202,000, Washington, which is about 190,000. I'm rounding it off, no? And Nevada, which is about 174,000.
Okay.
Ma'am, last, sorry po, who are the cabinet officials po that will going to accompany the President to US?
The final list always comes closer to the date of the trip. So, but it's also safe to assume that because the relations between the U.S. and the Philippines is multifarious, and it covers a lot of areas, he would bring with him, of course, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, our Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the Secretary of DND, most likely National Security Council, members of the economic team, and because of certain aspects, maybe the Secretary of Justice. And so the final list, though, is something that will be released in due course. And because he's also meeting with the business community, it's safe to also assume that he will have some businessmen who may join him in the trip.
Okay. Ivan Mayrina, GMA7.
Ambassador, if you could just please give us more details on the president's schedule. I know you said it's going to, of course, with President Biden, and he's going to meet with the Filipino community. But for the remaining days of the duration of the visit, who else is he going to meet with, and what other priority outcomes are set for this trip?
Actually, I do want to give you the answer, except that when I was given the information, I was told at this point, maybe we give a general overview of what will happen, and then closer to the date, I'm sure PCO, when you join the plane, would actually share with you some additional information. Suffice it to say that the President will have official meetings, not only with the Office of the President Biden. He will also be meeting with other government officials. Then he will also have business meetings. He will have the PhilCom. Then he will also have that policy speech that will be in one think tank in the United States.
Thank you.
Okay. Pia Gutierrez.
Hi, ma'am. Is the president also expected to follow up on the earlier commitments that he was able to secure from American businesses during his last trip to the U.S. last year?
Maybe since his economic team will be joining, that could be one of the things that will actually be undertaken by members of the economic team. But I'm sure that beyond what has actually been pledged, there's something that has to follow through, but there will be other areas that will also be explored.
Okay, and I think we're about to wrap up. We have one last one from Nestor Corrales again, Philippine Daily Inquirer.
Ambassador Daza, is the President already aware of the recent incident in the South China Sea, and what are his directives to concerned government agencies?
I think the directive has always been constant, that we'll have to promote Philippine interests, and if there are intrusions, if there are illegal actions that are undertaken in our waters, that we do the necessary action. And from our perspective, that would mean appropriate diplomatic actions, whether it be in terms of the issuance of note pervals, or if necessary, a clarification or a meeting with concerned parties.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador Data and ASEC Nayan, for the briefing about President Marcos Jr.'s upcoming meetings in the U.S. and the 40th ASEAN Summit. And thank you very much, Malacanang Press Corps. We will be back shortly for another press briefing on the situation of the Filipinos from Sudan. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you.